My in-laws went on a vacation to Honolulu and left me to look after my mute sister-in-law, Shirley. Just before leaving, my husband, Patrick, told me, "Taking care of her is your responsibility. Don't slack off." But as soon as they left, Shirley shocked me by sitting up and saying, "All right, let's go too." "Hi, my name is Barbara, and I'm 25 years old. When I was younger, I dreamed of becoming a pop star, but as I got older, I realized it wasn't going to happen. By my late 20s, I had let go of that dream. I met Patrick through a mutual friend and started dating him because, honestly, my mom kept pressuring me about having grandkids. Patrick and I got along well, especially when I found out he'd also dreamed of being in the entertainment industry when he was younger. Now, Patrick works at a big trading company in Brooklyn. I used to work at a bank after college, but quit when we got married. One day, we visited Patrick's parents. He has a younger sister, Shirley, who had a brain illness called encephalitis when she was a child. At first, they thought it was just a fever, but it didn't go away. By the time the doctors figured it out, it had caused brain damage, leaving Shirley unable to speak or walk properly. Since then, her mom has taken care of her. Oddly enough, Shirley and I hit it off right away. Even though she couldn't talk, she used sign language, and I eventually learned it too. One day, I jokingly signed to her, "We're like best friends who've known each other forever, right?" She smiled and signed back, "Yes, let's stay close friends forever." I happily replied, "Of course we will." But my mother-in-law was the opposite of Shirley. She was always sarcastic and critical of me. Patrick and I live in a condo about 45 minutes from their house, but that didn't stop her from showing up unannounced. Every time she visited, she'd find something to scold me about. "Patrick's shoes are messy." "A man's shoes say a lot about his job. It's your job to make sure they're clean," she'd lecture. She even called him Bodney, like he was still a little boy. "Make sure the laundry is folded neatly, or Bodney will be upset. And never go to bed before him, even if he says it's okay." Her criticism seemed endless, but I just tried to keep the peace. When we were dating and even early in our marriage, Patrick was kind and thoughtful. If I wasn't feeling well and asked to eat out, he'd agree without hesitation. If I liked a designer handbag, he'd surprise me with it a month later. But about a year into our marriage, he started to change, or maybe that's just how he really was all along. He began coming home late, smelling like alcohol. He said he was busy with work, even on weekends. He also stopped inviting me to visit his parents, which felt odd. One day, I decided to ask him about it. "Patrick, you've been so distant lately. You barely talk to me anymore. It feels like you're not the same person." He stared at me for a moment, then said coldly, "That's not true. You're overthinking things." I didn't want to let it go. "I don't think I am. You've changed, Patrick." But he shut me down with, "Stop bringing this up." Then he walked away, leaving me hurt and confused. So when Patrick suddenly said, "I'm going to my parents' house this Thursday. What are you going to do?" I was surprised. He hadn't asked me to come with him in months. "Can I come too this time?" I asked quickly. He sighed. "That's why I'm asking." I was excited and said, "I'd love to. I've missed Shirley." But Patrick didn't seem happy about it. He frowned slightly when I mentioned his sister. "Yeah, you and Shirley seem really close, huh?" he said. "We are. It feels like we've been best friends forever," I replied, trying to cheer him up. On Thursday, we drove to his parents' house in Minnesota. We even stopped at a bakery to get some pastries for his mom. She was hard to please, but pastries usually helped. When we arrived, Patrick's mom greeted us, but her expression soured when she saw me. Clearly, she wasn't happy I had come. "Mother-in-law, I brought you some pastries," I said, handing her the box. She took it, peeked inside, and said in a dismissive tone, "Oh, these again. They're getting boring, but if you insist, I'll take them." Then her face lit up like a kid getting a new toy. "Is father here?" Patrick asked. "No, he's at a meeting." "Why? Did you need something?" she replied. "Not really. Just wanted to talk to him about something," Patrick said. I hadn't heard anything about Patrick wanting to talk to his father, so I asked, "Do you have something important to discuss?" Patrick gave me a sharp look and said, "It's none of your business." "What do you mean?" "We're married." Of course, it's my business, I argued. Before Patrick could reply, his mom jumped in.
Exactly.
If Patrick doesn't want to share something with you, then stop whining. I knew it was useless to argue with her, so I stayed quiet. Just then, Shirley appeared in the doorway. When she saw Patrick, she smiled and said, "Oh, Patrick, you're here?" Patrick surprised me one day by suggesting a family trip to Honolulu. "How about you, sis?" he asked Shirley, his mute sister. She shrugged and signed, "I'll pass. I don't have a passport." I was caught off guard. Patrick was always so busy with work, so it felt strange for him to plan a vacation. "Patrick, is everything okay at your job?" I asked, still confused. "Everything's fine. I wouldn't suggest this if work wasn't going well," he replied, sounding a bit annoyed. His mom, who always seemed to dislike me, glared at me and added, "You shouldn't meddle in Patrick's decisions. You're being too nosy." Then Patrick dropped a surprise. "Actually, Barbara, the real reason I brought you here is that I want you to take care of Shirley while we're on vacation." I was shocked for a moment, but then I realized staying with Shirley would be much better than going to Honolulu with my mother-in-law. "Okay, I'll take care of Shirley," I agreed, even though it hurt a bit that Patrick didn't even think of taking me on the trip. "But you didn't need to drag me here just to tell me that." "Well," Patrick said, "I figured if I told you in front of my mom, you'd be less likely to argue." It was clear they had planned this together, and I felt cornered. After the conversation, I went to Shirley's room. She was lying on the bed, but smiled brightly when she saw me. "It's been a while. How have you been?" she signed. "I'm good," I signed back. "Patrick asked me to come today, but it's strange since he hasn't brought me here in months." Shirley's expression turned serious. "My brother is always hiding something. He's never been the open type," she signed. Then she told me how Patrick and the rest of the family were planning a trip to Honolulu. "I'm staying behind," Shirley signed with a grin, showing she was completely fine with it. We kept chatting, and I really enjoyed our time together. I always wondered why Shirley and her mom were so different, and now things were starting to make sense. A few hours later, Patrick came to get me, and we went home. As I was leaving, Shirley gave me a sly wink and signed, "I'll tell you soon." Fast forward to the day of the Honolulu trip. Patrick and I went to his parents' house, but while the rest of the family packed for their flight, I was getting ready to stay with Shirley for the week. I brought my luggage to her room, and she greeted me with excitement. "It's happening," she signed with a playful grin. When I went back to the living room, Patrick's family was getting ready to leave. Patrick spoke loudly, reminding me, "Taking care of Shirley is your responsibility. Don't slack off." Even my mother-in-law chimed in, "Make sure you get along with Shirley. It's better for you to stay here anyway." Then she added something that made me clench my fists. "If anything happens to Shirley, it'll be your fault. We'll hold you responsible." I couldn't believe their nerve. They were leaving their disabled daughter behind for a vacation and making me the scapegoat if anything went wrong. I kept quiet, not wanting to argue, and went back to Shirley's room. The moment I stepped inside, Shirley jumped out of bed with more energy than I'd ever seen. "Come on, let's get going," she said out loud, breaking the silence I had grown so used to. I froze, my mind racing.
"What?"
I managed to say, completely shocked. Shirley laughed. "I told you. I can walk and I can talk too." "Since when?" I asked, still in disbelief. "Since last year, I think," she replied casually. "Why have you been hiding it from everyone?" I asked. Shirley's face grew calm as she started to explain. "There's something you don't know. My dad and mom are both remarried. I'm my dad's child from his first marriage. Patrick and my other sibling are from my mom's side." Suddenly, everything made sense. The way her mom treated her like a burden, her coldness towards Shirley. It all clicked. "I had a feeling," I admitted. "Yeah," Shirley continued. "Mom can't stand me, and I didn't want to deal with her, so I pretended I couldn't talk or walk. But Dad knows everything. He's always been on my side." I tried to take in everything Shirley was saying when she dropped another surprise. "That's why I've decided. We're going to Honolulu too?" "What?" I asked, completely confused. "You mean today?"
"Yep."
"And we'll even be staying at the same resort as Patrick and his family." I couldn't believe it. Wait, I'd love to go with you, Shirley, but do you even have a passport? Of course. I secretly got it last month. And don't worry about money. Dad is paying for everything. Our flights, the resort, even your ticket. I was stunned. I see. I guess we're really going to Honolulu then. And just like that, we were off. Shirley and I took a taxi to the airport, where her father was waiting to see us off. Barbara, I know this must be a surprise, but I hope you enjoy the trip, he said warmly. Thank you, I replied, still feeling overwhelmed. I feel bad that you're covering all the costs. Don't worry about it, he reassured me. As long as you two have fun, that's all that matters. We boarded our plane on a different airline from Patrick's family and landed in Honolulu early the next morning. After checking into the resort, Shirley and I shared a room, both buzzing with excitement about the trip. While we unpacked, I casually said, "Your father seems to have traveled a lot." "Yeah," Shirley replied. "He's been on lots of international business trips, even to Honolulu a few times." "So, what's the plan?" I asked, curious. Shirley smirked. "I'm pretty sure my mom and everyone will be at the restaurant tonight. I think it's time for a little surprise." I laughed, loving the idea. That sounds fun. But first, we should get some rest. We're both jet-lagged. Good idea, Shirley agreed. I couldn't sleep at all on the plane. After showering, we climbed into bed and quickly drifted off into much-needed sleep. By the time we woke up, it was late afternoon, around 5 o'clock. Shirley was already up, putting on makeup when I stirred. "Sorry, I slept too long," I said, feeling guilty. "No worries," Shirley said with a smile. "I just woke up too." We both needed it. Now we're fully recharged and ready for action. Around 8 o'clock, I told Shirley I'll head down to the restaurant to check things out. I snuck downstairs, staying hidden near the entrance as I scanned the room for Patrick and his family. There they were, sitting happily at a table in the far corner. I moved closer to get a better look, and then I noticed something shocking. A young woman was sitting with them. I didn't recognize the woman sitting with Patrick and his family. She hadn't been with them when they left his parents' house. I nearly gasped out loud in shock as I strained to hear their conversation. I caught parts of what Patrick and my mother-in-law were saying. "I'm glad it's not that woman tonight," my mother-in-law muttered. "I really drew the short straw with her. She's tainted our family." Then Patrick's voice came, filled with disdain. "I want to divorce her and start over. I'll find a reason and squeeze every penny I can out of her." His mother added coldly, "Even if you don't have a reason, we can make one up. She's such a terrible match. I wish I could just throw her in the trash." They continued talking, completely unaware I was listening. It was clear they were planning to get rid of me, all while celebrating with this mystery woman. I fought the urge to confront them right there and instead hurried back to my room, my heart pounding with anger. When I got back, Shirley looked up at me. That took a while. "What happened?" she asked, noticing my pale face. "I saw something shocking," I whispered, still trying to process what I'd heard. "Patrick brought a woman I've never seen before. They were talking about divorcing me." Shirley gasped. "What?" "That's awful." I nodded but felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Honestly, I feel relieved. Now that I've seen him with someone else, I'm ready to move on. I can finally divorce him." Shirley grinned. "That's a good thing. So, shall we go make our entrance?" With a mischievous smile, we headed down to the restaurant. We asked the hostess for a table near Patrick's and were seated close enough to hear everything. They were still deep in conversation, completely unaware of us. The insults about me kept coming, and I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at how relentless they were. Shirley caught my eye and gave me a small nod, our signal to begin. I stood up and walked straight to their table, my voice loud and clear. "Are you all having a good time?" The look on Patrick's face was priceless. His mouth fell open, and my mother-in-law's eyes went wide with shock. For a moment, they were completely frozen. Finally, my mother-in-law broke the silence. "What are you doing here? And how is Shirley here without a wheelchair?" Shirley stood up, smiling confidently. "I don't need a wheelchair anymore." The room seemed to freeze as they processed her words. Patrick and his mother just stared at her in stunned silence. "Thanks to you," Shirley said sharply, "I've regained my ability to walk and talk. I must have caused you so much trouble all these years, but I'm fine now," Shirley said calmly. When did you start talking again?" my mother-in-law stammered, her face pale. "Maybe about a year ago," Shirley replied casually. "Why didn't you tell us?" Patrick asked, still in shock. "Because it was easier for me if you all thought I was still mute," Shirley said bluntly. "And, besides, I heard what you were saying about Barbara." My mother-in-law's face turned even paler. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to recover. "We weren't saying anything bad about you, Barbara," Patrick quickly lied. "Oh, really?" I said, pulling out my phone. "Because I recorded everything. Would you like to hear it?" Patrick's face twisted in anger. "Barbara, you've been nothing but trouble. Now you're making these ridiculous accusations." I stared at him, calm but determined. "Once we're back, I'll be contacting my lawyer to start the divorce process. You can't deny what you've done. You're here with another woman, plotting to divorce me. You even called marrying me a bad lottery ticket. I expect compensation for that insult." Realizing they'd been caught, my mother-in-law tried to backpedal. "Barbara, dear, I've always liked you. Let's work this out with Patrick. That woman means nothing to him. I'm sorry, but I can't live with a man who sees me as a bad lottery ticket," I said firmly. "Enjoy your time with this woman, but don't be surprised if I seek compensation from her too." The other woman, now pale and trembling, looked terrified. Patrick, desperate, fell to his knees. "Barbara, please don't make this a big deal. My company has strict policies. If they find out, I'll lose my job." I shook my head, unimpressed. "You don't sound sorry at all," I said coldly. "You're married, yet here you are in Honolulu with another woman. I will never forgive you." Hearing this, my mother-in-law collapsed to her knees beside Patrick, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Barbara, forgive my son," she begged, her voice shaking. By now, the entire restaurant was watching us. The scene had drawn everyone's attention, and the manager was approaching our table, looking concerned. I stood up, ready to end the scene. "Shirley and I will head back to our room now. You all enjoy the rest of your Honolulu vacation," I said calmly. "I suppose things will get a little more complicated when you return home." Patrick, now sobbing uncontrollably, shouted, "Please forgive me. I can't afford to pay any compensation." His outburst made the restaurant manager frown. The manager spoke to a nearby staff member and then turned to Patrick, politely but firmly saying, "You're disturbing the other guests. You need to leave." Patrick, still in shock, didn't seem to process the words. Moments later, 2 large security guards appeared. Without much effort, they hauled him out of the restaurant. Patrick struggled and cried, but he was no match for their strength. My mother-in-law and the other woman sat frozen, their faces a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. Shirley and I exchanged surprised glances, stunned at how far things had escalated. Still, I couldn't help but feel Patrick had gotten exactly what he deserved. 2 weeks later, Shirley and I returned home. I heard that Patrick had been released shortly after being thrown out of the restaurant, but had stayed in a state of shock for the rest of the trip, keeping to himself. It didn't bother me in the slightest. The day after I got back, I went to a law firm where an old college friend worked. My friend wasn't available, but I was assigned a female lawyer who was friendly and easy to talk to. I explained everything: Patrick's cheating, his lies, and the hurtful things he'd said. After listening carefully, she assured me that I had a strong case for divorce and could claim alimony. She also said she'd investigate the woman Patrick had been with in Honolulu to see if I could claim compensation from her too. A month later, the lawyer contacted me with an update. They had proof Patrick had been seeing the other woman for about 5 months. This meant I could seek alimony from her as well. "Please get as much alimony as you can from both Patrick and that woman," I told my lawyer without hesitation. She smiled and gave me a reassuring nod. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Not long after, a hefty sum of alimony from both Patrick and his mistress was deposited into my account. Looking at the amount, I couldn't help but mutter, "Well, That's karma for calling me a bad lottery ticket. For months later, out of the blue, Patrick and my mother-in-law showed up at my door. To my surprise, they both looked gaunt, as if they'd lost a lot of weight. Their once arrogant, confident faces now seemed worn and tired. I opened the door just enough to say, "What do you want?" "I have no interest in seeing either of you." Patrick's voice was weak as he replied, "I'm sorry, Barbara. Could you lend me some money?" Patrick looked at me with desperation. "I lost my job, and the woman. She left me. I don't even have enough money for food." His mother, looking just as defeated, added softly, "I divorced my husband too. I'm broke. Please, Barbara, we're begging you." Tears rolled down her face, but I felt nothing. I crossed my arms and said firmly, without any emotion, "Too bad. I have no obligation to help either of you. And even if I did, I wouldn't. Now leave." They stood there for a moment, speechless, before slowly shuffling away. After they were gone, I grabbed a handful of salt and sprinkled it across the doorway, a small ritual to cleanse my home of their negative energy. It felt like the final step in shutting the door on that chapter of my life for good.